Welcome in Saturday evening. That was a fun day of football, man. Three really good games. The first and the third game were obviously the most exciting, but that last one got the visuals going, right? The snow globe visuals that reminded me so much of what happened about 11 months ago in Lambeau Field. The 49ers got their snow globe moment. I mean, as I was sitting in the press box at Lambeau and it started snowing there toward the end of the game, just like tonight in Buffalo, I just thought I was, because I was looking through glass down at the field, I thought that I was looking at a snow globe and the players were playing down in the snow globe. It was really one of the coolest visuals that I had ever seen in a sporting venue in person. And then today I thought that NFL Network, besides one mistake, did a really good job capturing the Bills Dolphins game. The camera angles were great. They captured the snow the way that it was supposed to be captured. I have to commend them for their crowd mics. It didn't seem overly quiet in the stadium. They actually captured how loud it was in Buffalo. A lot of other networks, most other networks, I think Fox does the best job probably on a regular basis, but these were the NFL Network games on the Saturday before Christmas. But uh, they did a much better job than CBS, NBC, or Amazon do with their crowd mic. They captured all that, but the one mistake that they made was that they went to commercial right after Josh Allen dove for the goal line on the game tying 2-point conversion try. And it was obvious that there was at least going to be a review, and that was one of the biggest plays of the game, right? You can't go to commercial right there. And so we missed it, and it had just started snowing. So we missed these awesome slow mo dramatic visuals of Josh Allen diving through the snow to try to cross the plane of the goal line. And when they did finally come back from commercial, all we heard was the official say that it was a touchdown. And, we just lost the entire drama of the review. Most of the time, you don't want reviews to take up too much time. It's like, okay, we get it. This is what it's going to be. But this review was so monumental in this game. And the play was so photogenic, especially with Allen diving up over the goal line. I can't believe that the producer over there at NFL Network thought it'd be a good idea to call in the commercial crew. They have to be able to override that next time. There's got to be somebody in a truck or in their studios. I'm guessing they're in New York. Even after 20 seconds of the first commercial play, even after you've gone to commercial, you've got to be able to call it back. You've got to be able to, okay, wait, we'll play the commercials later. Let's interrupt these. Let's stop after the first commercial and let's throw it back to Buffalo because we've got an epic review happening in the snow. But it didn't happen. Otherwise, though, I thought NFL Network did a really good job carrying an awesome game today. And it just reminded me of this. It reminded me of shattering through the snow globe in the 49ers' final drive heroics to win at Green Bay. Deebo Samuel with a run on 3rd and 6. And obviously, what you see here is the big moment of Robbie Gould celebrating after it wasn't a short kick. There was some apprehension there. He was right at his limit, right at his range. And it was much colder in Green Bay that night than it was in Buffalo tonight. I mean, we were talking about sub-zero temperatures in Green Bay. And right now in Buffalo, I think it's like 25 or 26. But the snow looked similar, maybe a little bit more of it, a little less wet in Green Bay since it was so cold. Still remember the drive to Appleton, Wisconsin after that game. Was really sketchy because I was the last person in the Lambeau Field press box. Still, one of my big regrets was, keep this up on the screen. One of my big regrets was not heading out onto that field at about 2 a.m. when I was done with my article, when I had a chance to wander around the stadium. The field was just coated in snow. The lights were still on. They didn't turn off a single stadium light. And I had a chance to go out on that stadium field, and I could have done a live from there, but I also might have frozen to death. I chose to stay inside, and I did the live from inside the press box because I was the last person there. And I pointed the camera down on the field. So that part was all cool. But I still regret not risking a little bit more, not stepping out onto Lambeau Field at -5, -10 degrees in the middle of the night. Because, that would have only been the first risk of the night. The second risk was driving to Appleton, Wisconsin in that kind of sub-zero temperature. And I mean, first you had to scrape the ice off of your headlights. The little headlight windshield wipers weren't enough. It was just so caked into there. So I started driving out of the parking lot, and I figured that, the headlights would take care of themselves like they do anywhere else, that isn't as cold as the Hoth system from The Empire Strikes Back. But no, like I couldn't see anything. The lights weren't working. So I had to get out of the car 5 seconds later, scrape off the lights, keep on going. And then you're sliding everywhere. And it was like, it should have been a 20-minute drive. And it was like a 45-minute drive. And finally made it to the motel. And then you realize, oh boy, these people here, they've got a long winter in front of them. And the Packers just lost. So those were my snow globe game memories. And then I remember flying back to the West Coast through Las Vegas, which was much warmer than Green Bay. And obviously the 49ers NFC Championship game against the Rams in Los Angeles was much warmer than Green Bay as well. What a run that was by the 49ers. Today, memories of that came back today when we saw the Vikings log the greatest comeback, the largest comeback in NFL history, right? Down 33-0 to the Colts. And they won 39-36. They tied it up at 36 at the end of regulation. Apparently at 33-0, the Vikings win probability, according to NFL Next Gen Stats, was 0.4%, which was the same win probability that Next Gen Stats calculated for the 49ers in week 17 or week 18 last year against the Rams, when the Rams had the football and the 49ers were down 7. It was a 0.4% win probability for the 49ers. Obviously, the 49ers got the ball back. They stopped the Rams on 3 straight runs. And then they turned around and they went, I think 90 yards. Was it exactly 90? Maybe 92, maybe 88. It was around 90 yards. Garoppolo to Deebo Samuel was a huge play. Jalen Ramsey barely missed that football. And Garoppolo to Jawan Jennings to tie the game. The 49ers turned a 0.4% win probability in LA into a win in overtime. Ambry Thomas sealed it with his interception. And obviously there was a whole lot more pressure on the 49ers 0.4% win probability than there was on the Vikings today, because the Vikings weren't fighting for a playoff spot today. They obviously clinched the division for it, but at 10-3 entering this game, they're in a much better position. The 49ers would have been eliminated had they not overcome that 0.4% win probability in LA. But anyway, just a crazy day. Yeah, you credit the Vikings for coming back. I was talking about the Vikings a little bit earlier today on the live where I talked about Brock Purdy. I don't think they're all that good, but they're certainly the luckiest team in the league. I believe they're 10-0 in one-score games, which is essentially unheard of. I'm not even sure if that's ever been done before in NFL history. Probably has, but it's really, really rare. The Vikings still, I think they might have gone into positive point differential today. I think they were -1 before today, and I think obviously they won by 3, so they're +2 now. But 11-3 with a point differential of only +2 is certifiably insane. There are a lot of good breaks that have gone the Vikings' way, including one on Buffalo's field, right, where Josh Allen fumbled a quarterback sneak in the end zone, and it wasn't even snowing in that game. So Minnesota, I mean, their DVOA is in number 21. I don't think it's going to improve above number 20. I mean, they struggled to beat the Colts today. It took the biggest comeback in NFL history to do it. And because of that, the 49ers, I think at halftime of this game, here's the playoff picture for the NFL. At halftime of this game, the 49ers were heavily favored to be the number 2 seed in the NFC. Now that Minnesota has won, I would say it's back to a toss-up. Here's what it looks like in the NFC side. There are 3 teams on the right here that have clinched their playoff spots in the NFC. The Eagles, they haven't clinched the NFC East, but they have clinched a playoff berth with their 12-1 record. They will almost certainly be the number 1 seed. Then you have the Vikings at number 2 currently. They have clinched the NFC North. They're 11-3. And then the 49ers on Thursday night in Seattle clinched the NFC West. They are 10-4. Had Minnesota not made that crazy comeback today, Minnesota would have dropped to 10-4 instead of 11-3. And the 49ers would have had the tiebreaker over the Minnesota Vikings due to a better conference record. The 49ers 8-2 within the NFC, and the Vikings 6-3 within the NFC. The 49ers have a very manageable schedule to finish. They play at Washington, and Washington, by the way, is inside the playoff picture as we speak. So it's essentially, as of right now, a game between the 3 seed and the 6th seed, which would be the matchup in the playoffs if the 49ers and the Commanders both made it in their respective seeds right now, right? But anyway, it's not going to be the playoffs. It's going to be a Saturday game at Levi Stadium. So it's a matchup against the Commanders. And then the week after that, the 49ers play the Raiders, who are currently slotted as 12th in the AFC. They're alive, but boy, hanging by a thread at 5-8. And then the 49ers finish against the Cardinals, who are 4-9, technically alive in the NFC, but also hanging on by a thread at 4-9. The Raiders and the Cardinals aren't very good. The Commanders aren't really either, but the Commanders have a winning record. They're 7-5-1 this season. And it will make for an interesting matchup for Brock Purdy, because I think the Commanders are going to be the best defense that Brock Purdy faces until the playoffs. And, let's pose one of the questions. Brock Purdy, Rookie of the Year, does he have a chance to do this? It's going to be interesting because obviously through 3 games, he's been really, really impressive. I showed the efficiency numbers in the earlier show. Why don't I put them back up on the screen? We talked about Brock Purdy specifically in the earlier show, but we might as well talk about him in more detail today. All right, popped it open here. Let's expand this. This is quarterback efficiency, EPA per play over the past 2 seasons. And what I did here to include Brock Purdy is set the minimum drop back count to 113, because Brock Purdy has 113 dropbacks. So EPA per play is a really solid measure of efficiency within an offense, within a scheme. You're seeing how well a quarterback operates a particular offense. It's the 4th column over here on the right. Obviously, Mahomes, who is this era's Jordan as far as quarterback play goes, he's ranked number 1. We talk about how efficient Jimmy Garoppolo has been, especially over the past 2 seasons. He's number 2. Look at Purdy slotting in there ahead of Joe Burrow, ahead of Josh Allen, ahead of Jalen Hurts, Tagovailoa, who did some good stuff today in the snow in Buffalo, Dak Prescott, and the Hall of Famers themselves, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Now, obviously, the sample size is still really small for Brock Purdy. This is the operative number of sample size, 113. Everybody else has at least 859, and over 1,000 for everybody except for Tua and Jimmy Garoppolo. So the question really is, can Brock Purdy sustain what he is doing moving forward into next season or not next season, moving forward into the next game? So far, it has been eminently impressive. And I asked this question right here. The key question is, will Brock Purdy trend toward his lower floor or his higher ceiling? Because this is what you're dealing with Brock Purdy. Purdy is represented by the red. Garoppolo is represented by the gray. The average line right here is the y-axis. You can see the dotted line moving up and down. As you can see, Garoppolo's performance, EPA per play, is on the x-axis, and then the range of outcomes is on the y. So that's a percentage range of outcomes. Garoppolo is almost invariably above average with his performance. Purdy has demonstrated a lower floor. You see more red over here on the left on the negative side of EPA, but a higher ceiling so far than Jimmy Garoppolo. See more red on the right. And because of that, first let me explain why. I think it's because Purdy's faster than Jimmy Garoppolo, so he's able to deliver more in off-schedule situations. He's got a 95th percentile 10-yard burst in the NFL, maybe even faster than Trey Lance's, which is an unbelievable stat about Brock Purdy. But obviously, he's got the lower floor right now because he's a rookie and he still is getting used to some of the potential snags of the NFL. But that higher ceiling is tremendously, tremendously exciting. So for Brock Purdy, moving forward, before we talk too seriously about Rookie of the Year stuff and 49ers Super Bowl runs and, how they're going to operate it when Jimmy Garoppolo is potentially back healthy in the playoffs. I mean, this is a one game at a time thing because this question needs to be answered. Will Brock Purdy trend toward his lower floor or his higher ceiling? And so far, the indications are good. So far, I think he's trending toward the higher ceiling, especially given the performance that he put on the road at Seattle with an injury that prevented him from throwing over the course of the week in practice. But later on, we're going to be asking questions like this, right? If this continues from Brock Purdy. And, maybe even now we can already ask this question. Kyle Shanahan, should he be the coach of the year? I mean, there are only 3 regular season games left. So the 49ers clinched their division before anybody else in football. Obviously, We saw the Minnesota Vikings and the Buffalo Bills do it today. The 49ers had a break. They got to play on Thursday, so they got to do it before everybody else. But for the 49ers to go from 3-4, which was what their record was in late October, right before the calendar turned to early November, to go from 3-4 to 10-4 and winning the division before anybody else is simply remarkable, especially considering the fact that they had to be on their third starting QB to do it. So, maybe this is the Shanahan Coach of the Year graphic right here. It takes both QB play and play caller delivery to have two of your guys in the top three. But the fact that the rookie 7th-round pick was thrown right into the fire in the biggest games of the year and has delivered that kind of efficiency fresh out of bed. Something about that has to be the coaching, the play calling, the 49ers system. And who's the overseer of the 49ers system? It is Kyle Shanahan. Two of his quarterbacks are in the top three if you judge by efficiency here over the past 2 seasons. And if I zoom out, if I make this about the past 5 seasons, just to give you guys a bigger sample, well, it doesn't change all too much. I just changed it to the past 5 seasons. Mahomes is still 1. You add in Breeze and Rivers because Breeze and Rivers have since retired, but they're 2 of the 5 most efficient quarterbacks of the past 5 seasons. And Purdy, with his 113 drop back sample, just kicks Deshaun Watson out of the top 5. So Garoppolo's 3, Purdy is 5. I mean, Shanahan does deserve some credit. Now, you guys know me. I've long tried to avoid giving singular credit to the quarterback or singular credit to the play caller. They operate in tandem. They always do. And low-level simplistic analysis is always going to credit one or the other and just throw the other guy under the bus. So with Jimmy Garoppolo, a lot of people wanted to throw Jimmy Garoppolo under the bus. It's all Kyle Shanahan's team. And then there's some people that really like Jimmy Garoppolo, like, oh, this is all Kyle Shanahan's fault. Right now, a lot of people are like, oh my God, Brock Purdy getting it done. And then, I'm sure in some time, Brock Purdy throws a couple interceptions. Inevitably, there are going to be some lows coming. Playing quarterback in the NFL is about surviving the peaks and the valleys. But once some people jump off the Brock Purdy bandwagon, they'll be blaming him and saying that it's all Shanahan, where those are all fallacious arguments, right? There's fallacy everywhere here. The fallacy is treating football as an individual sport when it is an entire cohesive operation required to be efficient on offense. And the quarterback and the play caller, and this goes back to Walsh and Montana, Walsh and Steve Young. I mean, you could go through the entire history of football. The quarterback and the play caller, the way that they deliver in unison is ultimately going to deliver efficiency, and that's ultimately going to deliver wins. But Kyle Shanahan certainly deserves credit for his part of this, his part for getting Brock Purdy right here, and also finding a way to get on the same page with Jimmy Garoppolo this year. I mean, this is a past 5 years kind of thing, right? So Garoppolo and Shanahan have generally worked well together for a long time. But this season especially, Garoppolo got even more efficient, and he got even more, I call it complementarily efficient. The way that he was able to set up the 49ers defense, which is obviously the number 1 unit in the league, was much improved over his previous years. And that was because Garoppolo was throwing fewer interceptions. He had a top 5 interception rate, as in top 5 lowest interception rate in the league. So the fact that Shanahan and Garoppolo were able to work well together during this regular season to cut down that interception rate, help the 49ers play complementary football. And now, I mean, if Shanahan, is a candidate for this, which I think he obviously is, if Brock Purdy is going to continue pushing for this, even though he didn't play till late in the season, it's going to be about continuing to avoid mistakes. Because I think that, right here, I put this a little bit earlier today. Brock Purdy is going to have to, where is it? Right here. Can Brock Purdy avoid regression in the turnover department? That's where he's had some breaks so far this year, right? Interception nullified against Tampa Bay. Interception dropped by Quandre Diggs against Seattle. A couple of those plays don't go your way if you're Brock Purdy. A couple games also probably start to trend in different directions. Or at least, we just haven't seen him have to bounce back from that kind of adversity. And it's coming. And that's the thing to keep in perspective here, to not become a prisoner of the moment. Over the last 3 games of the regular season, the 49ers play a good defense in Washington, a bad defense in the Raiders, and a bad defense in Arizona. So the biggest challenge will come first against Washington. And if some rough moments do come from Brock Purdy, how's he going to react to those? And maybe it's better for the 49ers if they see those now rather than later, because Purdy's almost certainly going to have to be their guy in the wild card round to open the playoffs. And now they have officially qualified for the NFL playoffs with Thursday's win against Seattle. And it will be a little bit hairy if the playoffs are where he's off a little bit, or a big sack happens, or an interception happens, and that's where he has to show that he can bounce back. So the 49ers want to give Purdy as much experience as possible because he's doing such a phenomenal job so far, that they want to make sure he has the runway to continue that when the inevitable valleys do hit. Because QB play, I know you don't like to hear it, but QB play in the NFL is going to be peaks and it's going to be valleys. And Shanahan has typically seen quarterbacks under him start off really hot. This goes back to Garoppolo in 2017. Mullins in 2018. Remember that Raiders game? Now, Mullins started to come back down to earth already in his second game. They scored 23 against the New York Giants on Monday Night Football. But by his third game, Nick Mullins, they lost to Tampa Bay 27-9. Offense wasn't doing much. But, I mean, again, like, that was an early career thing. Kyle Shanahan was able to create, in the case of Mullins, probably enough smoke and mirrors to hide Nick Mullins' shortcomings and accentuate his strengths. And the good news for Brock Purdy is that I think he's already went through one cycle here of adjustments and counter adjustments against NFL defenses. Because remember, the Miami Dolphins and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers blitz a whole hell of a lot. Seattle didn't blitz nearly as much. They played a lot more coverage. And Purdy, even though he had that oblique injury, was still able to sit back and still able to identify what was, being thrown at him from a defensive standpoint. And I thought that he still delivered successfully down the field. So it was fun to watch Brock Purdy against Seattle. Hyper-efficient performance for much of the game, 11 of 11 to start. It'll cool off a little bit after, but the 49ers have to be thrilled. I mean, again, the reason that we're even talking about something like this after the 49ers started 3-4 is because they've had awesome play from the quarterback position as far as depth goes, right? Trey Lance went out early this year. Then you had your quarterback depth was Garoppolo, and it is Brock Purdy. And both of those guys have played as top 5 QBs this year so far. I mean, no, I don't think there's a team in NFL history that could say that its quarterback depth has yielded top 5 efficiency from QBs 2 and 3. And the sample size on Purdy isn't tiny anymore. It's small, but it's not tiny. 113 dropbacks. So we'll see if he keeps on going. But it's been quite the story in that department from the 49ers this year. Just a lot of fun stuff to track. The defense is surged number 1. The backup QB, the third string QB is playing awesome football. The offensive line, I think, is improving. That game against Kansas City is really showing to be an outlier, which, the injury situation, I think, suggested that it might be. The 49ers, even the game against New Orleans now is looking like an outlier to me, and I'll explain why. The 49ers didn't play well up front against New Orleans, which also shows how good the 49ers are. They shut New Orleans out despite not playing that well on the line of scrimmage, but they were coming off of altitude in Mexico City on a short week against the Saints. And the fact that they were able to beat them 13-0, that was impressive. But they didn't have any sacks, and they gave up way too much pressure against the Saints, right? So what really stood out to me was on this short week against the Seahawks, the 49ers had 27 pressures and the Seahawks only had 4. That just is a total illustration of complete and utter dominance along both lines of scrimmage. And if you could dominate both lines of scrimmage, then you could just sprinkle in some good QB play, some awesome skill position play, which we know the 49ers have with Christian McCaffrey, and they'll be getting Deebo Samuel back. I mean, you might be one of the favorites. And here, let's look at the playoff picture. Let's start talking about the playoffs. Let's start talking about possible matchups for the 49ers. Pop this open on the screen. Here we go. So 1 seed gets a bye. Only the 1 seed gets a bye. It's not how it used to be where 1 and 2 get a bye. Only the 1 gets a bye. The 2 seed, which is why the 49ers are jockeying with the Vikings for the 2 seed. The 2 seed will get a second home game provided they win their first home game. So if the playoffs started today, the Eagles would get the bye. They wouldn't play in that first round. The Minnesota Vikings would play in the first round at home as the 2 seed. The 49ers would play at home as the 3 seed. The Vikings would play to 7, so the Vikings would host the New York Giants. And the 49ers would play as the 3, so they would host the Washington Commanders. Your other game in the wild card round would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the 4, hosting the Dallas Cowboys, the 5. Now, that obviously flips if the 49ers pass the Vikings, which I still think is very, very possible. I think it's a toss-up at this point. It was very likely earlier today at 33-0. It was even likely at the point where the Colts decided not to kick a field goal and wanted to run the quarterback sneak, which looked like Matt Ryan made it, but the officials had other ideas. But anyway, it still is, I think, very reasonable to expect the Vikings to lose one of their last 3 and expect the 49ers to win all of their last 3, in which case the 49ers would move up to 2. The 49ers move up to 2, well, they would play to 7. Today, that's the New York Giants. The Commanders would go and play the Vikings instead at 3. But where this would really matter is the second round, where assuming everybody won, that was a favorite in the first round, right? So assuming that the Buccaneers won, assuming that the 49ers won, and assuming that the Vikings won, because all those teams I think are going to be, well, the Buccaneers probably won't be favored over the Cowboys, but let's just assume home teams, higher seeds win, right? Home teams, higher seeds win. The second round, you'll have the 1 Eagles, the 2 Vikings, the 3 49ers, and 4 the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it's going to be reseeded in that second round. The Eagles are going to play the lowest seed at home. That's going to be the Buccaneers, assuming they beat the Cowboys. And the Vikings and the 49ers then would be the natural second round pairing. And because Minnesota currently has the higher seed, the game would be in Minnesota. If Minnesota had lost today, then we'd be looking at a flip here, and that game would be theoretically, potentially, whatever you want to say, conditionally, in Santa Clara. So that's why these final 3 games of the regular season are so important, both for the Vikings and for the 49ers, because a home game in that second round is at stake. Now, what happens if the Cowboys beat the Buccaneers in that potential first-round game? As they'll be favored to beat the Buccaneers because the Cowboys are a top-tier team and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers aren't. Well, something similar. It's still going to be based on seeding, right? So this is where it's really, really interesting to me. If the Cowboys beat Tampa Bay, they're the lowest seed to face the Eagles. So then Dallas has to go to Philadelphia for the divisional round. And then Dallas then it just depends. The 49ers obviously would play the Vikings. We'll figure out who's at home for that game over the next 3. But say that you have 49ers Vikings in the divisional round of the playoffs happening at the same time as Eagles Cowboys. I'm going to make my face bigger here because I'm going to look you right in the eye here. What would you rather have? Would you, if you're the 49ers, assuming you beat the Vikings, would you rather have an NFC championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles on the road or an NFC championship game against the Dallas Cowboys at home? Because I know some people that are more scared of the Cowboys than the Eagles. I think they're both excellent teams. If you look at the team tier chart, they're both up there in that upper tier. The 49ers have been a little bit better, obviously. A lot better, I guess, since week 8. But that would be the choice. You could theoretically get the Cowboys at home for an NFC championship game the way that this is lining up, which is absolutely fascinating to me. Now, to maximize your chances, if you're the 49ers, you want to pass the Vikings here over the past 3 games. And if the Cowboys do take out Philadelphia in that divisional round, you would have home field advantage throughout the whole playoffs if you're the 49ers, and you could get up to the number 2. So today, for the 49ers perspective, it was disappointing that Minnesota came back, but Minnesota still could lose another game. They play a game against the current playoff team next week right here. Actually, we'll see. Minnesota, if the playoffs started today, they'd play the 7 seed, right? But we get a preview of that next week, 2 against 7. New York Giants coming into Minnesota. So don't hold your breath, but it's possible. But then after, I think, is where it gets really hairy for Minnesota. Because, again, this is not a good football team. The Vikings are number 21 DVOA. They've won a lot of games. Regression is certainly going to catch up to them at some point. Obviously, they make it to the playoffs now. They've clinched that. But once they face a good team with a lot on the line, don't be shocked if Minnesota gets blown out. Because that's exactly how they've played this year. They've squeaked by in the regular season. People, look at that Buffalo win and like, oh, look, they hung in there with Buffalo. Yeah, that's the regular season. When all of, the Century Towers are lined up at you and, you're under that harsh spotlight in the playoffs, those squeak by wins are so much harder to come by. So to me, once Minnesota gets in the line of the 49ers, of a team, even somebody like the Cowboys, anybody here that you look at this NFC playoff picture, any of the upper tier teams, I don't think it's going to be a pleasant experience for Minnesota. But anyway, they still have tests after the Giants next week. They're going to play the Packers, who are technically still alive, on New Year's Day in Green Bay, outdoors, cold, Aaron Rodgers, all that good stuff. And then they're going to play one of the eliminated teams, the Chicago Bears. It's probably, it's still going to be outside. It's going to be cold, January 8th. But that Packers game, I think, threatens the Vikings. The Vikings still got some tough games ahead of them. So don't, look at today as some kind of final verdict on who's going to get that number 2 seed in the NFC. The 49ers, even after that game, clinching the division against Seattle, have a whole lot to play for against Washington, against the Raiders, and then against the Arizona Cardinals. And, for one of those, Deebo Samuel might come back. You might have Deebo back for Arizona. Maybe you save him for the wild card round. Maybe you start practicing him, but don't play him, pitch count him. Javon Kinlaw might be coming back. I mean, why don't we take a look at the 49ers roster now that we have more of you on board on this beautiful Saturday evening? See where the 49ers are at from a health perspective, from an availability perspective. Here they are. Maybe I could just eliminate that. All right, here's your 49ers roster depth chart. If you want to follow along, I'm copying and pasting this into the comment section. All right, there you go. All right, so position by position, obviously, at QB, I'm going to keep the pink on Brock Purdy here because supposedly, he was hurt while he was playing. He was available to play, though. He's got that oblique injury. Garoppolo hurt. Not really sure when he's going to come back. Nobody's sure when he's going to come back. He's on the timeline of a broken bone right now, which, 6 to 8 weeks is the ballpark, but that lines right up with a playoff run. And the fracture was in that Lisfranc area, but there was no tendon ligament tear. So there is optimism, but the 49ers obviously need to make sure that Brock Purdy can hold down the fort for as long as possible, which so far for 3 games, he's done a fantastic job at. So quarterback depth, I think, is what it all comes down to for the 49ers. The more QBs you can have that are capable, the better off you'll be, because you can never rule out an injury to anybody, as we've already seen from Brock Purdy. He's already gotten hurt. It just seems to be like the running back room for the 49ers. The QBs you cycle through them because they're getting injured so often. So the 49ers need to be as insulated as possible. In the running back room right here, you're going to get Elijah Mitchell back. He's one of your IR return designations, right? There's only 2 of those left. So you're probably going to use one on Elijah Mitchell. I think that Jordan Mason might remain your closer even then, because nobody wants to try to tackle Jordan Mason when they're tired at the end of games. But Mitchell will layer the depth along with Christian McCaffrey. The odd man out here, I think, is obviously Ty Davis-Price. It's obvious, I think, that the 49ers view McCaffrey, Mason, and Elijah Mitchell in much more esteem than Ty Davis-Price. You get Deebo back at the wide receiver position. That layers more talent onto the backfield, because Deebo obviously is a player that's going to rove in between the backfield and the wideout room. You're fully healthy at tight end and offensive line, which is really big at this time of the year for the 49ers. You're not fully healthy along the defensive line, though. Givens should return. The 49ers are counting on him to be back from the MCL. He's not on injured reserve. And Hyder, he played, so we can take the injury designation off of Kerry Hyder. So, they moved Hassan Ridgeway to injured reserve. He was always a long shot to just come back at the very end of the season, but they gave up on that. They needed to open up a roster spot for Akeem Spence, who they promoted from the practice squad. T.Y. McGill is getting more playing time now, and we will see if this big name right here, Javon Kinlaw, gets in on the party. He should start practicing on Tuesday. But they have time to decide on Kinlaw. That practice window is going to be 3 weeks long. So they have plenty of runway to determine whether or not Javon Kinlaw's knee will be ready for some big games and a potential playoff run. Now, who does he replace? Well, it's too early to say. There's a chance somebody out here gets hurt, right? Then Javon Kinlaw can just replace them. So I don't think you activate Javon Kinlaw until you absolutely face a deadline if you're the 49ers. And that deadline is probably still 3 weeks away because he hasn't even been officially activated to the practice list for the return designation from IR. But it's a good potential reinforcement to have. Go to the linebacker position, all healthy there. That's huge for the 49ers. And then the DBs, well, there's obviously some depth concerns. Tarvarius Moore at safety is out. Ambry Thomas tweaked his ankle again in this past game. You just lost Dante Johnson for the season on top of Jason Verrett and Emmanuel Mosley. So if you're the 49ers, you're a little thin at corner. That's why Janoris Jenkins saw his first activity for the team in a game against Seattle. But your front line is healthy and looking strong. Charvarius Ward, Diamondo Lenore, Jimmy Ward, Talanoa Hufanga, Tashawn Gibson. I mean, that's quite a robust front line in the secondary. And I think the 49ers, I should, highlight Charvarius Ward because he's in the concussion protocol. But they're hoping that he's going to be back sooner rather than later. If Ward is back, Janoris Jenkins, I think the 49ers can, say, hey, at least he got a few snaps against Seattle to acclimate because now the 49ers can be better prepared to potentially trust Janoris Jenkins, who's 34 years old, in a bigger spot moving forward. So that's a look at the 49ers roster right now. I'm going to answer some questions, take it to the Q&A, drink some water, and then we'll call it a night here. Saturday night, no game tomorrow, but still got to keep the live rolling. Yeah, highlight Danny Gray as well. Good call. I actually haven't updated the sheet since the Seattle game, so we're going to do that in a little bit. The Rams are 4-9, and only because they had that Baker Mayfield miracle in the game against the Raiders, which I think probably said more about the Raiders than it did the Rams. But 49ers get to play the Raiders. Warwick asks me, do the 49ers normally fly back to SFO after games? No, they normally fly back into San Jose. 17 is Josh Johnson. Yeah, the 17 is behind me. But this was before the 49ers signed Josh Johnson. See the 17 right there? So I had to say, it doesn't say Josh Johnson. Your hint is that you've probably already seen the jersey out in public. Some of you might have seen it out in public. Some of you. Not on me. I don't wear the jersey. I'm neutral. The jersey's just decoration. Jersey's nice color, but some of you probably seen it out in public. A fan has been wearing it. But like I said, can't turn it around until the 49ers win the Super Bowl. Matthew asks, how can the 49ers clinch the second seed? What teams can help them out? The New York Giants by beating the Minnesota Vikings next week. The week after that, the Green Bay Packers can beat the Vikings. The week after that, the Bears can beat the Vikings. As long as the Vikings lose once and the 49ers win all 3 of their remaining games, 49ers will be number 2. And they have a chance to get home field advantage throughout the playoffs, which would be crazy because they could do it without the number 1, right? Because the Cowboys, the Cowboys are this potentially lethal weapon in the playoffs that could knock out the Eagles. Could always happen. I think when they played at Philly earlier this year, Cooper Rush was starting, wasn't Dak Prescott. Yeah, they do. They have 2 away games, the Vikings do, in the cold at Green Bay and Chicago. Is it a possibility QB room depth can return next season? Well, yeah, the 49ers are going to emphasize QB room depth, which right now they've needed every bit of it this year, right? But they have Purdy and Lance under contract, so you're going to have QB room depth. They're going to trade Lance. A lot of people are like, oh, okay, now it's time to trade Lance. Purdy looks good. They're going to value depth over everything. So even if Purdy continues looking good and Purdy becomes your starter moving into 2023. I mean, I'm talking about next season. Well, I'm presuming Garoppolo is going to price himself out of the 49ers market the way that things are going. Even with the foot injury, he was playing so well that it's going to be tough for them to retain that robust of a quarterback room. At some point, Garoppolo's got to think about himself, right? Last year, it worked out for both sides because Garoppolo hadn't thrown a football in months with that shoulder injury. But well, he had thrown a football, but he hadn't done it in a game situation. At the time that he re-signed, it was as he was working off on the side there for so long. But anyway, you have Purdy and Trey Lance under contract. So QB room depth is a big thing. It was a big thing for Bill Walsh. It's a big thing for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. What happens if the 49ers win out, the Eagles lose out, and the Vikings lose one? Well, the 49ers would pass the Vikings. The Eagles lose out. The Eagles have 4 games left, right? Wait, the Eagles are 12-1. Yeah, the Eagles have 4 games left. So losing out would be 12-5. So the 49ers would be the 1 seed. If the Eagles lose out, the 49ers would be the 1 seed. If the Eagles lose 3 and they finish 13-4, and the 49ers also finish 13-4, I'm not sure who'd have the tiebreaker because it would depend on NFC record, and that actually might end up relying on which game the Eagles win out of their final 4. So too early to do all those mental gymnastics. Let's just see how these games play out. But it is fun to talk about what would the playoffs look like if they started today picture. To me, that's always fascinating. All right. Yeah, well, this is true right here. Wait, well, I accidentally put this one up. It's a good question. Greenlaw is built from the mold as Willis and Bowman, or Mike is asking me. He's built a little bit different because he's a little bit lighter. He's a little bit faster. They say Dre Greenlaw was like the fastest player on Arkansas's defense, which is crazy to me. I mean, he kept up with Tyreek Hill the other day, which was, whoa, like that's eye-popping kind of stuff when he kept up with Tyreek Hill against the Dolphins on that crosser. So he's lighter, but yes, Greenlaw is a throwback in the sense that he just tackles really, really violently. Violent tackler in the open field. A lot of fun to watch. Should be in bigger Pro Bowl consideration. This is the one I meant to put up there. The Cowboys would be in the mix for the 1 seed. Yes. The Cowboys would absolutely be in the mix for the 1 seed. You can't forget about them. They're 10-3. They're still a game ahead of the 49ers right now in the loss column at 10-4. Although the Cowboys didn't look as impressive against the Texans recently. So we'll see. I mean, December football sometimes holds some surprises, almost always holds some surprises. So we'll see what the next one will be. Greenlaw is awesome. And sorry, I'm putting up the wrong ones here. Click. Purdy on a rookie contract for 4 years. All right. This is the last thing I'm going to do. I'm going to show the team tier ranks weeks 8 to 15. Let me open them up. Then we're going to finish up the show. 45-minute show seems about right. Team tiers, it's loading. Bear with me. Be patient. And we will update. Here we go. The team tiers from weeks 8 to 15. So this is after the loss to Kansas City. This is how dominant the 49ers have been. Remember, you want to be further to the right and further up. So top right is the goal. 49ers are in the very top right. Now, somebody told me, hey, exclude garbage time. All right. And I said, okay, let's exclude garbage time. So you put the win probability filter on. So you do something like when the win probability is under 10, yeah, we'll do it at 10%. So when it's above, in between 10 and 90%, basically eliminating outliers on both sides of the football. So if we eliminate garbage time from the equation, look at that. 49ers are even further up and to the right, and they are on a different tier than the next best teams in the NFL. They are in their own tier. And this is ever since acquiring Christian McCaffrey. For all those who said that Christian McCaffrey wasn't worth it. Well, this is what he's helped do for the 49ers. They are the very top tier. Look at that. The Eagles in the second tier along with the Chiefs. And then you have the Cowboys, the Bills, the Bengals, the Lions. That's a surprise later in the year. And the Miami Dolphins. Maybe a little bit too late for the Lions, but still really interesting to see what Dan Campbell is doing over there. So fascinating stuff. You ask, I deliver. Those are the team tier ranks for the 49ers. Why don't you guys subscribe to The Athletic? And why don't you check it out on Twitter? Subscribe to the channel as well. Everybody take care. Thanks for joining on this beautiful Saturday night. Enjoy the games tomorrow. Maybe check in with you at some point in between all of them. Take care.